Time for markets now, and the recent USDA grain stocks and WASDE reports lowered corn and soybean inventory levels well below pre-report expectations, shocking the markets and leading to a sharp price rally. Now, with harvest in full swing for many producers, we're keeping an eye on what's next and how this might impact your agricultural decisions. Scott Brown, ag economist from the University of Missouri, joined me on Wednesday to discuss what we've been seeing in the markets since the USDA news broke.
You know, Troy, we've really tightened up on the corn markets here over the last couple of months. If you look at what USDA is now projecting that will go out of the end of this current marketing year with, we're 600 million bushels below where we would have been back in August. So the markets have tightened a lot. We've seen futures markets that have moved up 75 cents or so over the last 60 days. To me, I think as we look forward, this is still going to be one of, does the crop continue to shrink? We haven't seen a lot of yield cut from USDA yet, although they did trim acres by 1 million with the last WASDE report, and I think that has a lot to do with some of the FSA data that's recently been out. So a much different situation than where we would have been just 60 days or so ago. I do suggest that perhaps markets are getting a little bit overheated relative to what the current situation looks like.
And in the past, when the USDA makes adjustments like this, is there anything we can expect? Because, we've seen the price rallies, but are there any other things history tells us that producers can plan for to maybe be ahead of the curve?
Well, I keep suggesting risk management is so critical in this period of time, and I think here's another case where with the rally that we've seen, I hope folks are pricing some of that new crop corn. I'm not saying that we're absolutely going to fall from these current levels, but I think prices are at levels that give us some reasonable return. And I hope folks will get a little bit of the risk out of the system for them as they're able to price. So I think there's opportunities here. And again, I worry there is downside risk in all of these ag markets when you think about how COVID-19 has been impacting us generally.
And then, Scott, this impacts other markets too. We always like to talk livestock with you. What advice do you have for the cattle producers who are having to make feeding decisions and figure out their input costs?
So I think they should plan for higher feed costs. I, for a while to them, always been saying, hey, we have feed costs at levels we haven't seen for a long time. Let's make sure we lock in some lower feed costs. I might be a little less interested in that right now, especially on the corn front. I hope we get maybe some break on feed costs for cattle producers. But I keep saying, I worry about the downside risk. Not that we're going to necessarily see it, but to me, there's a lot of downside risk related to how COVID-19 affects us longer term.
And with beef demand, is it still going strong in spite of all the disruptions still happening in the country?
Amazing how well it has been going thus far. And I go, let's just hope we continue down that road. I, again, worry that at some point consumers look in their pockets one day and don't have as much money. Now, I think a lot of that has to do with what kind of federal stimulus we see going forward. We know we've had issues getting any kind of additional federal stimulus done to this point, but I'm wondering if we won't see another round once we get beyond current elections. But a 10% cut in the economy, which is what we're really suggesting, plus or minus here for 2020. To me, that suggests some weaker demand for meat products longer term, and we just haven't really seen that yet. In fact, we've seen the opposite, strong demand. And I don't want us to forget that traditionally a weak economy is not always so good for us in terms of meat demand.
And Scott, talk to me about the hog market too, maybe a little more touch and go than with beef. Where do you see this market going as we move into the fall and into the winter?
So I, again, will say I'm worried about the downside risk in hog markets. For me, a little different than cattle in that we've got to have big runs of hogs. We're going to have to slaughter 2.7 million head a week here through the remainder of the year just to kind of keep up, if you will, with what's going to be the supply of hogs. So plentiful supplies. Domestic demand's been good. When you look at what wholesale pork prices have done, they've done nothing but gone up over the last 60 days or so. I think we need strong export demand, and I think we've seen that as well. But with the growth in supplies that we see, again, if we get any hiccup on the demand side, I think we could unravel some of this recent strength pretty quickly on the hog side of the equation.
And then with African swine fever, maybe not getting as much talk since COVID has been going on, but tell us the latest on ASF around the world.
Yeah, so I think ASF has actually been really helpful for U.S. markets here over the last 60 days as well, with Germany having ASF cases in the wild boar population there. It has shut them out of some of the markets that I think we've been able to gather some export strength in. It reminds me to say, here in the U.S., if we were to have an ASF outbreak, again, I worry that would come in the wild population is how it would start to unfold here in the U.S. That's not a great scenario. You don't really affect domestic pork supplies, yet you're likely shut out of export markets. If the United States were to be shut out of export markets right now, not a scenario we want to talk about. And so Germany gives us a good example of what I think could unfold in the U.S. Keep it in the wild population and it never gets in the domestic population at all. It's still not a very good situation. Now, I think you look at China, also some stories beginning to come out of additional incidents of ASF. To me, that's all good news for U.S. pork exports, but we sure don't need ASF to come here in the U.S.